Welcome to the Time for a Reset podcast, the podcast where I, Paul Frampton, interview senior marketers on the big issues of the day and the thing that they want to see reset with an ever-changing landscape. Welcome back to another episode of Time for a Reset. I'm your host, Paul Frampton, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Lysa Hardy. Lysa is the Group CMO and the Managing Director of the Direct-to-Commerce part of Hotel Chocolat. Lysa has had an illustrious career, having worked in many big brands, including T-Mobile, RAC, Jules, and many others. And she's also transversed a number of C-level roles, owning the customer officer role, commercial officer, as well as many stints as CMO. So I'm really excited to chat to Lysa because I think we've talked many times on this podcast about the importance of the customer, understandably, but also about the background of sales and commercial being a great foundation for marketers, i.e. knowing how to attach marketing to growth and to revenue into the business. So welcome, Lysa. Lovely to have you.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So where we always start, Lysa, is if you had this big red button in front of you that you could hit reset on something in the marketing industry, what would that be?
I think for me, there's a piece around the latest and greatest fads or trends in technology. So, and don't get me wrong, technology plays a really important role in marketing, but sometimes I look at my plans and look at what I'm doing and the conversations I'm having, and I wonder if I'm an IT director or a marketing lead. And I think that the danger is that, you know, technology is so important now and so pervasive, but there's so many variations of it. You know, my inbox literally every day is filled. I must get 20 emails a day from different tech companies that have got the answer to all my problems. And it's so easy to just jump on something because it's the latest thing being talked about. And, you know, that's the bit for me I want to do a bit of a reset on. I want to bring things back to the core principles of marketing because they haven't changed. And technology can be a really excellent facilitator in that, but it's not the silver bullet.
Right. No, that I think that's a great place to start the conversation. So, as you say, there's technology all around us, and technology dominates a lot of the marketing headlines these days. Right now, it's all of the big tech players actually laying people off, and what's happening at Twitter. But how do you, as a CMO, balance kind of keeping up with technology so that you're aware and can know the possibilities alongside, to your point, thinking about how they fit into the craft of marketing, which probably isn't much different to what it was 30, 40 years ago. How do you get that right balance? And kind of linked to that, Lysa, often IT and technology and marketing are quite separate in organizations. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, as I said, you know, I could literally spend all my day looking at various different technology, you know, miracles that are gonna help me. And the irony of this is not lost on me, but before I was in retail, I spent 10 years in the mobile telecoms sector. And actually my role for those 10 years was to bring data services to life. So a lot of the stuff that, you know, as marketeers we're looking at and utilizing now are things I developed. So, you know, as I said, it's not that I don't see the value in those things. I absolutely do. But the balance is really important. And I suppose I've got a perspective because of that time I spent in telecoms, looking at all kinds of opportunities for services for customers. But what got cut through then is similar to how I look at it now, which is, you know, looking at, well, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the customer need here? You know, the definition of marketing is to solve a customer need profitably. So how's this technology going to help me? And really kind of looking around the peripheries of it. So, and talking to people as well. So, you know, if there's some new technology maybe I'm not familiar with, who is familiar with it that I can talk to and really get under the skin of it. I also try and look at things from a different angle or even a different sector. So, you know, is another sector using this technology? How are they using it? Is there a parallel there that I could draw? Is it really additive to what I'm doing, or is it distracting? to what I'm trying to do. How does it fit with my brand? Because sometimes, that is a key point, that there's things that you could do with some brands that might not be right for other brands. So, does it take the brand in the right direction? And also I always kind of think, what's the upside and what's the downside? So it's similar way that I would think about any kind of new product development or new initiative we'd run. But really just to keep it in perspective and not just get excited that there's some new technology that's going to answer all my challenges.
Right. Yeah, I think they're great ways to think about it. And as you say, it's like listening to you, I think what I'm hearing is your business and your brand will have a very clear strategy and North Star, and you should be able to therefore decide whether technology fits into that and actually, to your point, kind of improves customer experience or helps automate something that needs to be done in order to deliver customers. But doing it for the sake of it, just throwing stuff on TikTok or deciding that you need to be in a new channel is not the way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, when the big metaverse announcements got made by Facebook when they launched, literally it was about 2 weeks later, and somebody asked me, so what are you doing with the metaverse then? What's your plan? And I sort of said, well, I don't know, because I don't really know if metaverse is a thing yet, just because Facebook have announced it. Mm-hmm. And they were quite critical of me, kind of going, oh, you're going to be behind. You've got to get in there. Other brands are doing stuff. Mm-hmm. And here we are down the line. And everyone is now looking at metaverse saying, well, what is it? Is it a thing or not? Right. And it's that kind of thing. It would be very easy to just jump in because a big brand is talking about it and saying it's going to be the answer in the future. But again, I guess from my experience in mobile and telecoms, there were lots of things that, at one point or another, we were saying this is the future, and lots of those have disappeared, and then they really weren't. But some of them absolutely were. Right,
and you can't.
Part of the reason I moved into.
Sorry, Lysa, go on.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say you can't make a bet on everything either, can you?
No, and that's the thing. Particularly in smaller businesses where you've got limited resources, you've got to choose your bets carefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I like about the way that you're articulating it is it's important to have a perspective and to have the curiosity to know enough about these areas to have an opinion. But saying that you're not doing it is not. There's nothing wrong with that if you've understood it, considered it, and decided it's not right for your business at that particular moment. And I think metaverse is one of those things. And I mean, metaverse and crypto and FTX and all of those things undoubtedly are going to change the industry or wider industries, economy, society over a longer period of time. But I think the big question mark is, will they change it in the near term when we have other pressures? And evidence right now suggests that it's going to go backwards before it goes forwards. But I think we all believe that there will be some shift that does happen. And as you said, I mean, mobile is a great example of a consumer behaviour that some spotted, others were late to, and then there was a fight between many hardware players and then the software guys to actually own it. And different people have managed to get their heads in front, depending on like the next iteration. So being aware and on top of new trends is key, but not just chasing them, because that can be a distraction if they're not right for your business.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. And I think, your point around at that point in time is really critical, because just because something's not right for us now doesn't mean it might not be right for us in the future. And that's, that's all the kind of the balance and the curiosity that a marketing lead needs to bring into the conversation is, is it right? When is it right? And just because it's not right now, it doesn't mean it's closed forever. It's always worth circling back at some point in the future to see if it's right at a future time.
Yes, great. And that's kind of quite a good segue into what I was going to ask you next, which I guess, how do you navigate conversations with the board or shareholders or investors around new things? Because I'm sure at times things bubble up into the FT. Yesterday, there was a piece on retail media in the FT. No doubt many CEOs and retailers will be kind of now thinking and talking to their marketing team about, are we doing enough? And the same will be true of customer data platforms or whatever it is. So how do you manage, like, if there is an opinion coming down at you that something should be done? How do you manage that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think, anybody who's a marketeer will appreciate that our part of the business is the part that everyone believes they're an expert in.
Unfortunately,
so we're very used to lots of questions on lots of things. And I think for me, business ultimately is about choices, right? So what priorities and what choices are you going to make? And I don't think I've worked in very big businesses. I've worked in very small businesses. I've never had one that has had limitless bandwidth.
Right.
So there's always a point that you've got to make choices. And I guess that's what I always bring it back to when I get asked these questions. If there's something, and that is a classic example, it's in the FT. So suddenly it's top of the board conversation. It comes back to, right, okay, yeah, absolutely. We're either already looking at that. We might even already be doing stuff on it, or maybe we're not. But where does that fit into the list of choices and priorities that we have as a business? And it could be something. So, when I joined the business at Hotel Chocolat, they didn't have a CRM system.
Okay.
And so for me, that was critical. That was the number one priority that we had to go off and fix, because without that foundation, anything we did was always going to be a massive challenge. So it then puts into perspective, there's all these other things we can be looking at. And we need to do all of those at some point in time. Yeah. But if we don't get that CRM system in place, there's no point in doing some of that other stuff, because we won't actually be able to execute it in the right way, or we won't be able to then amplify some of the stuff that we're doing.
Right.
So that's how I always context it.
Yeah, no, I like that. When you compare not having a CRM system to talk to your existing customers with Metaverse, it's a fairly easy decision, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
I think there's a piece around, as marketeers and understanding marketing's a blend of art and science, right? So, and a lot of people don't necessarily see that from the outside. And that's what's incumbent upon us marketeers, is to contextualize how we make those decisions in, how we engage with customers, how we execute the marketing funnel, how all of that comes together to drive growth in a business. Mm-hmm. So, in the example I just gave you about the CRM system, there was also a lot of pressure at the time to, drive our social following. And I was saying, well, absolutely, we've got to do that. But what's the point in driving social following if we can't actually do anything with those customers?
Right.
So, there's an education piece around, right, what we do is we acquire customers, we bring customers into the business. We then have to take them through a customer journey in terms of onboarding them as a customer, immersing them in the brand, growing yes, hopefully their relationship with us over time and retaining them. That requires its very heart CRM system. So yes, of course we've got to do social following, and we could do some of that in parallel. Once we've got that CRM system, it means that, I can really then turn on the taps in terms of bringing customers in, because I've got a system that helps me then do something with them and retain them. Yes. If I'm just bringing them in and I can't do anything with them, that's, kind of wasted money.
Right. No, I see.
And that's when people kind of go, okay, get that, logical.
Yeah, and ever more kind of important when a business like yours, which I assume is obviously a fairly premium brand, and therefore it's not for everyone. So the customers that do buy into it, you want to encourage more loyalty and frequency from. Absolutely.
What we don't want to do is to bring in the wrong kind of customer. Because acquiring customers is fairly straightforward. Keeping customers is the challenging bit. And part of that challenge is bringing in the right kind of customer in the first place. And, doing that work to make sure you're doing that right means ultimately you're going to be much more effective and much more efficient with your marketing spend than just going out and grabbing customers and then having to grab more because they're not sticking with you.
Absolutely. And I think there are a lot of newer to market D2C brands that have got investment. I think they're able to prove that they can get their CAC at a good level, but then their challenge is how they actually turn that into profitable kind of customers and LTV. So I think that sounds like a very sound approach. So sticking with like you mentioned it, like marketing there's to drive growth and to fulfill customers' needs profitably in order to drive growth for your business. How do you have those conversations with the board? I talk to many marketeers that will say that they believe they have a seat at the board table. Few will say they believe that they're at the top of the board agenda, and some will say that they don't believe that they're anywhere near the level of kind of strategic input that they should be. How is it for the businesses you've worked in? Not necessarily Hotel Chocolat, but for the businesses you've worked in, do you see in general marketing having an important enough seat and voice in driving growth and strategy in the business?
Well, I'm certainly very fortunate in the business that I'm in currently that, marketing is absolutely on the agenda, and a business that is very focused on its brand and the importance of its brand in driving that business performance. So it's not, I guess it's quite easy in that respect with my current role, but I have been on boards where it is more challenging. And I think for me, a lot of that comes from a bit of a lack of understanding about what marketing actually is. If a CFO is on a board, everybody knows what the CFO does. A CMO, and I know this from some of my peers in other businesses, where, we talk about what we're accountable for and responsible for in the business, and it can be quite different. And I think that therefore drives a little bit of confusion around what the marketing team do. And, people know the basics around communications. But I think when you start then getting into driving growth and commercial, there can be a little bit of mystery around it. And I've always tackled that, and certainly in the business that I was in, where it was a bit of a challenge with kind of looking at, okay, the first thing to do here is actually build trust. The marketing department's got to build trust. And funnily enough, as an example, I had a conversation with somebody in my team yesterday who was pulling together something for the finance director, and had said, is this the story you want to tell? And I said to them, look, as a marketeer, we tell stories, right? That's our job. But when you're talking to the finance director and you say, I'm trying to tell a story here, the finance director talks in facts. They talk in data and fact, not stories. So just even that use of language can breed some mistrust. Right. So I think it's really key, if you are in that environment, the first thing to think about is, how do you build trusted relationships across the business? Talk in the language of the other teams, get that trust there, and demonstrate what you're trying to do in terms of driving growth in the business.
Great advice. I love that, Lysa. And when you were talking, you reminded me of when I interviewed Pete Markey, the Boots CMO, who was talking about how important.
Yeah, I know Pete. Yeah,
to market the purpose and the breadth and depth of marketing internally. Because you talked about it as a growth engine. Often, whilst certain marketers may believe that, they may not necessarily be communicating in the right way so that it's seen that way. And I mean, it's kind of one of those almost like marketeerist cartoon moments, but often in some businesses, it's seen too much as the colouring in department. Now, that's deliberately provocative, but i.e. it's seen as just communications and advertising, not as something that drives revenue and profitability. So you've obviously had the benefit of doing a number of commercial roles and sales roles in your career. How much has that helped shape your ability to lead those conversations as a group CMO?
Hugely, enormously. I can't tell you how much that shaped me as a marketeer, because I guess I started from a real understanding of my job was to sell things, and that led me to marketing, because marketing is ultimately about selling stuff. So I guess my lens as a marketeer always comes from we're here to sell stuff. Now, obviously, over the years, I've added in and learned and developed my experience around the importance of brand in selling things, and price premium, the importance of customer journey, all that kind of technical stuff that we do as marketeers. But my entry point in is always, and I always bring it back to, we're here to sell stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a simplicity to that, isn't there? Actually, I've also had the fortune to be CEO of a team where I had a sales team in it, and had to start a business where I was the first employee and had to sell. And it totally changes your perspective when you have the target numbers, and you've got to think of ways to target the right type of client profiles. I'm obviously talking more B2B right here, but the same principles I think apply. Like the dynamics of sales and everything ultimately being targeted back to revenue, even though it's not in the same way as marketing isn't completely everything's not completely attributable. Sales is similar, although you can usually tie it back to a salesperson. I think that growing up with that kind of, I wouldn't say pressure, but that kind of the drive that you've got to hit a number, and that is like, obviously marketing is, as you say, is driving to sell things and generate revenue, and often there will be a revenue target that's targeted, but often it gets a bit lost because people will say, well, we can't completely attribute it, therefore we'll just use these surrogate metrics, which are consideration and intent and maybe traffic and whatever else. So do you, is that kind of also something that you believe it helped you with? That it's just a mindset, I guess, is what I'm saying. I'm kind of blathering on a little bit about it, but I'm just trying to kind of capture what it is about that sales experience and commercial experience that changes your mindset when you go into marketing.
Yeah, I'd absolutely say it's about a mindset. I think for me, what's your success criteria? And you can say, oh yeah, look what we've done to brand consideration. We've smashed it. But if you haven't actually converted that brand consideration to sales, it's irrelevant. Yeah. Businesses aren't businesses because people like their brand. Businesses are businesses because people buy stuff from them, and the business is making a profit. And for me, that very first thing I talked about fulfilling customer needs profitably, it should be at the heart of every marketing team. And I've been approached about roles in the past that have no commercial responsibility at all, and for me personally, it might work for some people, but for me personally, I can't get my head around how you can run a marketing team in a business without any commercial responsibility. There has to be a clear link there.
Yeah. No, I would entirely agree. Now, I've also seen lots of businesses where the remit, if you even look at the job spec for a remit for certain heads of marketing and CMOs, it doesn't have that aspect. And by far and away, from my experience, the CMOs that I've worked with that have the most influence are the ones that are also the chief customer officer as well, or additionally have some kind of managing director type responsibility, which means they have some P&L ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, my advice would be for people that are in those kinds of roles where they don't have that, all is not lost. You can still draw some linkages to, just because you're not accountable for the sales, you can still say, well, that's how I'm going to measure myself, and be really open about it. And, talk to the CFO and say, right, okay, if we're driving brand awareness, we need to link that to sales and show some parallels. So let's look at what the sales numbers are, because that's the ultimate measure of success. And, there might be a lot of other reasons why sales aren't coming through that aren't your responsibility, but even having that conversation will change the dynamics of marketing in the business.
Yeah, great point. I love that. And changing tact a little, clearly there's a lot of focus, a lot of trend articles talking about how MarTech and first party data is changing and transforming marketing. Obviously, from where you started with your reset, I think I know how you'll answer it, but I'm just interested in how that's changed how you approach marketing, if it has at all.
Yeah, just the proliferation of MarTech opportunities, as I've said, sometimes I feel like I'm working in IT. But what it does allow us to do from a benefit point of view is do things generally quicker than we would if we were trying to manually do it. Yeah. It also allows us to get much more granular, and certainly some of the tech that's coming now with AI and machine learning, suddenly starts to speed things up and raise the potential of things tenfold. So it's absolutely a good thing. I am a fan, but it comes with it this complexity around, well, which are the right horses to back, which are the things, what are the priorities? And of course, the other part is that we're then also dependent on our IT colleagues to help implement some of this technology. Yeah. Then we start bumping into IT roadmaps that have got requests from all parts of the business, not just marketing. So it does adds a complexity around, well, actually, when can we get this stuff done, even once we've prioritized it? And then what does that mean to how we're going to deploy that technology and what it does to our marketing budgets and performance?
Right. I think it comes back to your other point around being able to articulate the commercial benefit of doing things and anchor it back to growth and the customer. Because then if the technology drives that and there's a business case, it becomes much easier for the IT department or the CFO to shift the priority that exists in that team, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. As we're moving towards the end of the podcast, Lysa, I'd love to ask you a couple of slightly more personal things. So I know you talk quite regularly about the realities of having a big job and juggling pressure. And I know you have a big family. I believe you're a mother of 4. Is that right?
I am, yes.
Yeah. And I'm a father of 5. So I have a large...
Wow, you beat me.
So I'd love to know how you juggle family and the pressures of having obviously a fairly kind of demanding executive role. And I believe you also do an NED role, and I'm sure you do a bunch of mentoring and speaking. So how do you balance all of that? I think people are always intrigued when people are able to do some kind of take on such variety about how you do it.
Yeah. And it is a challenge, definitely. And I also launched a new skincare business with my husband.
Yes, right. Yeah, just that on the side.
A few weeks ago. So I don't sleep much. But no, I think for me, it's about, there's a couple of things really. First of all, you have to be really organized. So I don't get up in the morning and think, oh, what am I going to do today? I'm a planner. So I know what I'm doing in the next 12 weeks. I know what I'm doing in the next month. I know what I'm doing in the next week. I know what I'm doing tomorrow. And in increasing levels of detail. So I also make sure that that planning approach isn't just to my work life, but it's to my personal life as well, to make sure that I have got that balance and time and quality time that I can spend. So, one of my kind of boundaries is I don't work weekends. So I work full time and I'm pretty busy during the week. So I make sure that weekends is family time. Now, we all know sometimes a crisis happens and you have to deal with it. So of course that can happen. But as a rule, I'm not doing emails or, sitting writing presentations at the weekend. That happens in the week.
Percent as well. I think that's a really important rule.
Yeah, because when, I guess I take a view of I can't be with my family or I choose to, work. So I'm not with my family as much as some, but I want to make sure the time I am with them is I'm present and it's quality time.
Yeah.
So that's really important. I think the other piece is around, your own oxygen mask. So it's a bit of a cliche, but if you're, and I learned this the hard way, right? So I spent a lot of time putting everyone else's priorities before my own. So especially when the kids were young, because you have to. And pretty quickly realised that even if you don't recognise you're getting burned out yourself, your body tells you pretty harshly. So So I learned that lesson, that actually in that time allocation that I spend across a week, there has to be time in there for me to have a breather. There has to be time for me to regroup a bit, have some thinking time. And so all of that goes into the mix in terms of how I plan my time, which is why planning is so critical for me, because if I don't plan, it all unravels very fast.
Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that. I think it's great advice, and I love the oxygen mask analogy. So finally, Lysa, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to either budding marketeers or marketeers that are further into their career? Like what's the thing that you've learned most that you keep in kind of laser focus every day?
Keep close to the numbers. I mean, I've talked a little bit about this. It's a bit of a theme throughout, but marketing must have a commercial edge. And, I think it's quite easy as marketers, because we are left brain and right brain people generally. Mm-hmm. We can see opportunities and creativity that perhaps some don't. But we have to keep close to the numbers, because that's what anchors everybody in a business. And, brings me back to my point that ultimately marketing is about fulfilling customer needs profitably.
Great. Well, that is, I think that's a great place to leave it. I've really, really enjoyed the conversation, Lysa, and you've taken us from don't get obsessed with every fad or trend unless it anchors to your business strategy. The importance of having commercial and sales kind of DNA in being a marketer, or if you haven't, just making sure that you're constantly thinking about how marketing is generating growth and, to your phrase, kind of fulfilling customer needs profitably. And then you left us with some brilliant advice about not just staying close to the numbers, but making sure you've also always got your own oxygen mask, no matter actually what seniority you are. This is an industry that is pretty demanding, and we all need some downtime and decompress every so often. So don't wait for your body to tell you it, because that's often too late. So look, Lysa, all that remains is to thank you for your time. And as I say, I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much. Loved it.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Time for a Reset. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. We'll be back talking to a senior marketeer very soon. Make sure you don't miss out on any new episodes by subscribing on Apple, Spotify or SoundCloud, and leave us a review at timeforareset.co.uk.